Welcome to the first edition of the Give and Go, presented by New England Soccer Today, NESoccerToday.com. My name is Brian O'Connell, staff writer, editor, joined here by Julian Cardillo from Boston.com, who also writes for New England Soccer Today. And today we're really going to talk about what the Revs faced this week, playing a Toronto team that came off a really important win against Columbus. What are some things that we kind of have to be aware about with this team coming here on Sunday?
Well, Toronto's really a wild card. I mean, Ryan Nelson has shoveled quite a few things with this lineup, with this team. The organization, as we know, is always in flux. And coming off that important win against Columbus last week, you know they're a dangerous team. Anything can happen. They came to Gillette Stadium this May. They had a decent showing, even though they lost that game 2-0. They really pressed the issue, and the Revs really had to work hard to get that win. And there's going to be more of that, I think, on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Toronto, as we've seen the last few times, have played the Revs really, really well. I mean, last time they came here last year, they won 1-0 due to a slow start by the Revs. Earlier this year, the Revs hung with them, and the TFC hung with them for basically the entire game until Caldwell scores in stoppage time. So I think this is really kind of a game that the pressure is really, really on them, because they've gone out on the road, won 2 games, and anything less than 3 points in this instance is going to be viewed as a loss. I mean, to be quite frank. So, predictions.
Well, they're at home, so this is, and also against a team like Toronto, which is you don't want to say the basement of the East, but they're toward the bottom of the Eastern standings. Against a team like this, you really should get a win at home. But you have to be aware of other things too. Psychologically, I think entering a game the first time this season in a playoff place, I think that's very important to note. And also the idea of these slow starts. The Revs had one last weekend against DC, and as competitions continue, you can't have those slow starts. They have to be shot out of a cannon from the start of the game, and that has to happen against Toronto. As for a prediction, I still think the Revs will snatch a victory from this, being at home, and they're on a really good run. So I'm going to be bold and say a 2-0 Revs win, just like the one last May. What say you, Brian?
Well, you took the 2-0 right out of my mind, so I'll say 2-1. I think it'll be a game where they'll come out, like you said, right out of the can. I think the emphasis will be there on a very, very strong start. We just talked to Steve McCarthy. The idea is maybe to get a few more long balls over the top and kind of press them, get the ball really out of their end, and just make their intentions clear right from the start. One thing that we also saw in the DC game was we saw Clyde Simpson as the defensive midfielder. Obviously, the first half wasn't their best first half, so Jay Hughes brings on Scott Caldwell for the second half. In your opinion, what do you think is the better option going forward at defensive midfielder?
Well, I think the DC game was a difficult game for Clyde Sims for a lot of reasons. Number one, the organization knows him. He was obviously a big component to DC's success in the early 2000s. And also, the Revs dug a hole for themselves because they didn't start off well, as we said. So because of that, I think Clyde Sims had a more defensive performance. Generally, he's the player that helps you out in transitions from defense to offense, and vice versa. And so I think when you dig yourself into that hole, that transition gets a little bit muddled. And so I think Scott Caldwell showed a lot of really good promise when he came on, because he's a guy who can do that too, but he's more of an offensive player. He knows how to open up that space. He makes that penetrating pass, and he opened up space on the flanks. And you saw that in DC. He got 2 goals that stemmed from the flanks. And I think Scott Caldwell was maybe not obviously, but I think he was the unsung hero of that performance. And as for the rest of the season, I think you have to speak to consistency. Obviously, Clyde Sims has had his good moments. He had that game in Houston where he put in a really good performance. He had an assist and a really great goal by Diego Fernandez. Towards the beginning of the season, he was seeing more playing time, but I think Scott Caldwell has shown through his high passing completion percentage, through the way he reads the game, that he might be more of a mainstay in the lineup for the rest of the season.
I would agree with that. I think that Caldwell had a very, very good second half. I think one of the glaring kind of things that I took away from the early part of the DC game was we had heard Macker just now saying that some of those long balls kind of got caught up in the midfield, and I think that was attributable to the fact that you didn't have a guy like Clyde Sims is not going to be a ball winner by any means. He's going to be a guy that orchestrates, that gets players going, and is a great transition from the defense to the midfielder. So I think you needed a stronger presence, and I think that Caldwell brought that stronger presence. He also brings that more of an attacking kind of dynamic to the defensive midfielder spot, more so than Clyde Sims. So we'll see what Jay goes with on Sunday, and kind of going into something a little bit closer to the end Sunday is tonight's All Star Game. It's been discussed, it's been debated, whether on Twitter, whether on Facebook, whether across the social media atmosphere. Players who deserve to be on tonight's All Star roster. Jose Gonzalez being one of them. Diego Faguni being one of them. In your opinion, who do you think deserves there's one bid? Who deserves it more?
I would say Jose Gonzalez, hands down. I think you have to look at the situation in many different ways. You have to first say, okay, is this one of the best defenders in the league? I think he's proved that. I think that because he has transformed that back line, that Revolution back line, making them the best defense in the league, that he absolutely deserves to be there. So there's your credential right there. He is one of the best defenders in the league. You also have to consider some of the other players that have been brought in, guys like Matt Beasler and Gonzalez. Are these guys there because they're good defenders, or is it is it any kind of idea because they're with national team? So I don't want to say it's political, but I think some voters or some people who make the decisions on who goes to the All Star game, maybe they don't consider bringing in someone like Jose Gonzalez. People think automatically to Beasler and Gonzalez. Aside from that, I mean, he's been a great professional. I don't think the Revs have the record that they have without Gonzalez, and I think this was absolutely an all-star snub. And from what I hear, actually, I can't speak to this officially, but a lot of the media from around the country voted him in to be there, and so maybe that makes it an even bigger snub.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I'll even take it a step further and say that All-Star games are inherently political because not only do you have the fan vote, but you also have the coaches, and the fans and coaches vote for who they know. And because Gonzalez is a newcomer, he's always got to go against the curve of going up against guys who are perennially voted every year in, year out. Matt Beasler being one of them, or Mark Gonzalez being another one of them. So, not to take anything away from Jose, but I feel that Diego is a very, very strong candidate, if not stronger, because I think you look back at the way the season was going before you bring in Diego, and the way that the season was going in terms of your offensive production was basically in the tank. You weren't getting anything from Benson. You weren't getting anything from Lee. You weren't getting anything from any of the other midfielders. And then once Diego's introduction to the lineup came about, the team started getting hot. So I think that maybe I'm thinking about it more of a maybe most valuable player kind of perspective, but to me, there's nobody more valuable on the team right now than Diego Faguni because of the fact that the team played right after his introduction to the lineup. So moving on to the MLS All Star Game, the format. We've seen for the past 10 years, we've seen big top European club versus MLS All Stars, whereas in the past when the league first started, it was East versus West. In your opinion, what works better? What are the advantages of which side?
Well, first of all, I think the All Star Game is great because it's inherently American. I love that MLS is an American league and it incorporates that aspect into it. I do think, though, that if you want to have a friendly against a world power, I think it would be more advantageous for the league and for its teams to showcase where they are on the soccer scale by doing a domestic team versus an international team, not necessarily taking the best players in the league and putting them on one team. And there are a lot of reasons for this. Number one is that you're putting players together that really haven't played with each other, so you're going to get a really muddled, messy performance. I don't think tonight's All-Star game is going to be a beautiful game by any means. Not just because of the All-Stars, but because of Roma. They're in preseason. They've made 15 transactions. They're a team that's in flux too. So I think from a credibility standpoint, I mean, what does MLS really gain from it? It's a great spectacle, but I think there's more notoriety when the Revolution play Manchester United, or Chicago play PSG, or LA play Real Madrid. I think you get more out of it that way.
We've talked about the MLS All Star Game, and we'll see what the All Stars and what Roma do tonight. So signing off for Julian Cardillo, Brian O'Connell, New England Soccer Today. Hope you tune in for the next edition.